Welcome everyone. Episode 41, Blake&VishSports. Sports. Got a different sort of an episode today, something we've done in the past, but not as recently. And that's going to be a Q&A. So we have a few topics beforehand that we want to get into, but overall, the main point of this video is just to, answer questions that you guys have asked with, when me and Vish have been on, me, Vish, and Grant have been on, that maybe we were a little too busy to answer. So you guys can ask those now, but Vish, how are you doing? It's middle of July already. Training camp's almost among us.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a weird time. I've never streamed this early, honestly. I just got off work and we streamed. Obviously, we didn't want to be coinciding with the NBA Finals because we both wanted to watch that. And second, we just happen to have time now. So it's nice, and I'm excited to answer a lot of questions because there's been a lot of good questions over the past 4 or 5 of these that we've done that unfortunately we haven't been able to answer. So if you've got them right now, you still remember them, now is the time because we're here ready to answer questions. We got a couple topics, but they're super relaxed, and we're mostly just here to answer whatever questions about anything, whether it's basketball, football, life, anything.
Yeah. And then first thing, wanted to put up there, thank you, Brandon Vincent. Yes, 41 episodes in already. Started in November, I want to say. So we're pretty far through. We have a big, we're going to try to figure out something big for episode 50 and episode 100. But thank you, Brandon. Much appreciated. I guess we can just throw in your questions now, and then we'll start with our first.
We'll get to them right after we finish our topics. They'll be very brief, so yeah.
Yes. And then Vish, did you want to go first with the first topic about tight ends?
Sure. So I'll give the same backdrop I give every single show. So this is the underrated tight end topic. So, sorry about that. So, as you guys know, we have started this new thing on here where we talk about underrated players at each position. We did quarterbacks, which I said Baker Mayfield, Blake said Ryan Tannehill. We did running backs, Blake said Miles Sanders, I said Kareem Hunt. We did wide receivers. I said DJ Moore. Blake said Robbie Anderson. And now we're here at tight ends. And so without further ado, I guess since I'm going first, I'm going to name my most underrated tight end in the NFL. And it's a guy to me that, in my opinion, his play isn't underrated. I think most people acknowledge he's a good player. I just think there's a lack of national conversation about him. To be fair, that could be because there's a lack of national conversation around all tight ends besides Kittle and Kelsey. But that's TJ Hawkinson. I think TJ Hawkinson's one of the 5 best tight ends in the NFL. I think he's really good. When you're talking about a complete football player, he's a really good blocker and he's a really good receiver. He's a very good underneath and intermediate receiver. I think he has more down the field speed than he showed. I mean, he's a guy who's averaged about 11 yards per catch in his entire career. But I do think that if you go watch him when he came out of Iowa and you look at his athletic measurements when he came out of Iowa, and he is a guy that can stretch the field vertically a bit more than, he's shown in his career thus far. I think there's other reasons that he's been restricted to only having that many yards per catch. But otherwise, I think he's a great player after the catch. I think he's a physical blocker. I think he's an excellent receiver. I think he's got great hands. I think he's one of the most complete tight ends in the NFL. Frankly, besides Kittle, I think he might be the second most well-rounded tight end in the NFL when you're just saying like block. If you're stacking up blocking and receiving, he's not the second best, but I think he has the best combination of blocking and receiving after George Kittle. And I think he's just a guy that hasn't gotten the national acclaim that he deserves. He's been really consistent, really steady since Detroit drafted him. If you remember, honestly, when they drafted him, he was considered a generational tight end prospect. Like Kyle Pitts obviously blows everybody out of the water this year, but TJ Hawkinson was a really big deal before that draft. A lot of people were saying he was the best player in that draft. And I don't know if he's lived up to that, but he's definitely lived up to being a hell of a player for the Lions. So to me, he's the most underrated tight end in the NFL.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I was going to ask you too, like, do you think he was worth the pick? Because from what I remember, at least, I don't remember him being like a generational athlete, but being a tight end and picked, I want to say he was like 9th or 10th. Like, you have to be like exemplary, because tight ends usually do not get picked that high, let alone in the first round. And it was, I know a lot of people in Detroit were kind of worried about the pick because of what happened a few years ago when they took Eric Ebron in the top 12. I want to say he was 11th or 10th, but he didn't really turn out to be that great. I would say Hockenson, where he was picked, ending up being probably a top 5 tight end. Yeah, I mean, that's a premier position. There's not many good ones. I'd say it's probably the most it's the position lacking the most talent when you just consider how many considered elite guys there are, because there's really only 3. It's Kittle, Kelsey, and then Darren Waller. And besides that, it kind of falls off a lot, and there's a lot of debate. But I would put him right there at 4 or 5. I don't think he is in that top 3 range. I think those guys are clearly a notch or 2 above. But being the 4th or 5th guy in the league is nothing to snub at. And then also with just him being underrated overall, there was an article that came out, and it was like a ranking of the top 30 tight ends or whatever. And he was below Kyle Pitts, who hasn't played a snap yet, Dallas Goedert, who I think Dallas Goedert's really good too, but I'd say Hockenson is certainly better than he is, and has proven to be better than he is. So even amongst, people ranking tight ends, that to me is interesting. And I think you kind of pointed it out too, that he is very well rounded in everything. And that was one of the things coming out of Iowa is he can block, and he's also a good receiver. And usually elite tight ends or good tight ends are one or the other, but he's both, and that's really, really invaluable. And for Detroit, who's probably going to be running the ball a lot more this year, getting Anthony Lynn on the roster or part of the coaching staff, a lot's going to be asked of him to block. So having him as a good blocker, and then having also a maybe top 5 O-line, in my eyes, they're going to run the ball a lot, and he's going to be a key contributor in running the ball.
I agree. And if you look at their receiving core, they're totally bereft of talent on the outside.
Yeah.
They really don't have real weapons. I mean, they lost Marvin Jones. They lost Kenny Golladay. Obviously, they lost Matthew Stafford. Jared Goff isn't a good drop-back quarterback. But the thing that I actually am a little bit bullish on Detroit's offense, and it has nothing to do with Jared Goff. I just think stylistically they suit who Anthony Lynn is so well. Anthony Lynn is a really good run game coordinator, and DeAndre Swift looked really good last year for them. They have a really good offensive line, in my opinion. I think Decker's very underrated. You might see me talking about Decker when we talk about underrated tackles. I think Ragnow is a top 3 center in the NFL, and I thought the Penei Sewell pick was one of the best picks in the entire first round when you look at value, fit, need, everything. And then so they're built to run the football, and they're going to be able to do it, and Hockenson is going to definitely help that. And so to me, I think that honestly he's just a guy that needs to get a little more national acclaim. That's what it comes down to. I think most people acknowledge this is like the DJ Moore conundrum, same thing. I think everybody acknowledges that Terry McLaurin, same thing too. Everybody acknowledges that DJ Moore is pretty good, or Terry McLaurin is pretty good, or Hawkinson's pretty good, but they don't actually talk about how good these guys are. And that's where I think TJ Hockenson, it's not even, I wouldn't say he's more underrated. I would say he's more underappreciated, because he's really one of those well-rounded tight ends in the NFL, one of those really, really good football, all-around football players, and it just doesn't get highlighted or talked about.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I honestly think Goff being there won't hurt a lot, because Goff can work the short game pretty good. I mean, he and Gerald Everett were a really good 1-2 tight end punch, and Hockenson will be the main guy. So, I mean, I expect him to get fed. He'll be the number 1 receiver on the team when the season ends, and he was last year too, because considering how much time Golladay missed. So, he's in for a big role, and I really am interested to see what receiver on the Lions does emerge into the number 2. They have Perriman, Tyrell Williams. I forget his name, but he was Equanimeous St. Brown's brother. I think it's Amon St. Brown.
Armand St. Brown from USC. Yeah.
And I think he was taken in the mid-rounds, but he was hyped up to maybe even be a second round.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see which Quintez Cyphers, I want to say is his name too. They have a few guys, but I'm interested to see who kind of steps in next to him. And because in the backfield, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams is a really, really good 1-2 punch. People forget Jamal Williams went there, and he was a great number 2 for the Packers, and I fully expect the same for the Lions.
And they're going to have the deep threat from Tennessee, the guy who caught the touchdown in the divisional round game against the Ravens, Khalif Raymond. They're going to have him too. So if everything works for them, they're going to have a team that runs the ball and they only throw it off play action, which play action Jared Goff can do. And and play action means linebackers come up and it's going to open up things for TJ Hawkinson. So yeah, to me, like, again, I'm not like bullish on the Lions doing well next year, but I don't think the roster is as bad right now as it's been laid out to be.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely are lacking talent, I think, in some of like the positions, mainly people like, I feel like the average person doesn't really like take into account how effective or how important an O-line is. And they more look at like, who are their receivers? Okay, Brashad Perriman's might be the receiver 1. Like, that is not good. But besides receiver, they do have a lot of talent at pretty much every position on offense.
Yeah. And my bad, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like when your receiving core is probably undeniably the worst in the league outside of Hawkinson, it does leave some concern, which is fair.
And when your quarterback is just a poor drop back passer, yes. But I do think that in this situation, if everything goes right, Hawkinson could be due for a humongous year because I think he's going to see the football more than he's ever seen it in terms of targets this year. And Hawkinson might finally get the national acclaim that he deserves, but we were there a step early, I guess, right now by talking about it.
Yeah. And he did get hyped up during the draft process. I will say that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Everyone was saying he deserved – a lot of people mocked him going to the Lions, and it did come out true. But they definitely – I'm sure there were some Lion fans that were worried about taking another tight end very early, and if they didn't pan out like Eric Ebron didn't for them, they would not be too happy with that.
Yeah.
But we can go on to the next one. And my tight end is a little different. He has some of the same bits about him and just kind of background. So previously he was getting passes from Jared Goff. The underrated tight end we previously mentioned, TJ Hawkinson, is now getting passes from Goff. And Tyler Higbee is now going to be getting passes from Matt Stafford. And Gerald Everett is no more on the Rams. He's on the Seahawks now. So that opens up a lot of snaps. I think that opens up a lot of yards, catches, and potentially touchdowns for him. So I really do think he is one of the more underrated tight ends. He's had glimpses and stretches of being just like brilliant, like absolutely great for 4 or 5 games where he'll dominate. And you're like, when you compare this 6-week stretch of his to anyone else, like you put him in the top 5 conversation when you stack up the statistics. I wouldn't say he's a top 5 tight end by any stretch, but he has performed at that level from time to time, and really solid pass catcher, pretty decent at route running, really fast after he gets the ball, which I think is underrated for him. And I really do think he'll have an expanded role with Stafford. Stafford targeted Hawkinson a lot. Now, they didn't really have any other great receivers, but it shows that he will go there. And Higbee is solid when given the chance. And I think Everett leaving is kind of the main thing that I think will help him be propelled a little bit more into the spotlight, and the fact that Everett was taking some catches and just snaps overall from him, but Higbee should be assuming the majority of those snaps. So I think he's due for a better year, and he'll have a better quarterback as well.
So I agree with you that Higbee is underrated, but I actually disagree with some of the reasons actually in terms of him having a bigger year next year. So I agree he's underrated from the sense that he's another all-around tight end. He's a good blocker and he's a good pass catcher, and he does both of those things at a pretty high level. And like you said, there's stretches where he can be the best offensive weapon on their team, and their team has Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I mean, there were games last year where Tyler Higbee was their go-to wide receiver, and he played really well, and he responded and was their go-to receiver. And he's pretty consistent in all areas of the field. And like you mentioned, he is good after the catch and fast after the catch. The reason I disagree is, one, though, in regards to Stafford, they did have Golladay and Marvin Jones, and they still went to, and like you said, they still went to Hawkinson. So, right, that translates. But the reason I'm going to push back, right, because everything from that standpoint makes sense, right? You have Kupp and Woods, but he's still going to go to Higbee. And their offense does get a lot of schemed up throws to Higbee, too. A lot of their bootleg shorter throws are for Tyler Higbee. It's because of Jacob Harris. And we did a video about Jacob Harris earlier, and he's kind of the new camp, the guy that was getting buzz from the Rams camp. So I'm going to put my stock into that. A guy with a composite athletic score of 9.88, a higher composite athletic score than Kyle Pitts. I think that Tyler Higbee is going to remain playing his same role for the Rams, because I think Jacob Harris is going to emerge in that Gerald Everett kind of tight end too, as their explosive weapon down the field and all of that. I think Higbee is going to remain having 50 catches, 650 yards, maybe 4 to 5 touchdowns. I think I agree with that. I just don't know if he will expand on that. But to be fair, I do think he's underrated, because he's not even looked at as a guy who you can get 50 catches, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns from. That to me is a legitimate tight end one. But Tyler Higbee is really just looked at, as a guy that's like a backup level tight end, a replacement level tight end. I don't think people have realized the improvements that he's made over the last 4 years. But I think Jacob Harris is going to ensure that Tyler Higbee remains at his consistent role, and he doesn't increase the amount of production that he has.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too. Like, Jacob Harris definitely could, and he has been kind of the, sensation of training camp, even on a national level. Like, multiple, not just Rams fans know about him, but it's covered a lot. How spectacular he has been. So, we'll see. It's just being the tight end position, like, rookie tight ends usually have a tough time translating.
That's fair. If
he has been as dominant as he has, maybe I am underrating him and not taking into effect that he could do what Gerald Everett does and maybe even better. So we'll see. But I think there's one point that needs to be made, and this is just so true, Brandon Vincent. The Rams have so many mouths to feed. I wouldn't say it's the most in the league, but they have, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 receivers / tight ends that are legitimately deserving of getting a lot of passes thrown their way. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, that's Tyler Higbee. So just to wrap it up, I had Tyler Higbee as my most underrated tight end. Vish had TJ Hawkinson. His was more underappreciated, because I think most people acknowledge that he is really good, but how good is more so the question.
So we have one more topic, I think, before we get to these questions. There's a lot of good ones, so don't worry. We will get to all of the ones that we can today. And if not, we'll get to more on a later date for sure. We'll do more Q&As. But without further ado, let's just do our last topic and then get there.
Awesome. So this is something that me and Vish and I have been kind of talking about this offseason a little bit. And we're going to say offense and defense, but I know it just says defense, but their offenses too. But we can start with the defense. But I think we started coming to this realization a little bit after the draft and kind of seeing who they got in free agency, because they made a lot of moves. I think the last time we saw them on national television, if you remember, Vish, Week 16, it was a Saturday game. It was Christmas, and Alvin Kamara scored 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It was not really close. It was more about how many touchdowns can Alvin Kamara have. And Mike Zimmer in the front office took that very personally. They did not ever want to see something like that again. And just to start off, do you want to talk about their defense and just give me your overall thoughts on what they've done, Vish?
Yeah. So first, I thought their defensive line was lacking size last year. Well, they fixed that immediately first thing this offseason by getting Dalvin Tomlinson and Michael Pierce, two guys that are absolute beasts in the middle of defenses, and they're absolute stuffers. Dalvin Tomlinson is just a beast. Like, if you want to talk about a big physical defensive tackle that stops the run, that is Dalvin Tomlinson. So they solved their first problem. Second problem, they had trouble getting to the quarterback last year. A lot of that had to do with Unique Ngakoue not working out and them trading him. The other part of it was that Danielle Hunter got hurt and Everson Griffin left. Guess who comes back next year? Danielle Hunter. And Danielle Hunter, when we're going to talk about underrated edges, I'm sure that Danielle Hunter is definitely going to pop into the conversation. We're talking about a guy who perennially gets 10+ sacks and is perennially looked at, in my opinion, as one of the 7 or 8 best edge rushers in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. But people don't talk about, Danielle Hunter as much as a big-time player. I mean, you look at the playoff game that they won, Kirk Cousins' big playoff game, the one that he finally overcame that game, all of that. The best player on that Vikings team in that game against the Saints was Danielle Hunter. Mm-hmm. He absolutely dominated Larry Warford in that game when he was rushing inside on third downs. So that's going to help. 3, they have a phenomenal middle linebacker. Eric Kendricks is special. He is big time. He's another guy. When we talk about underrated, Eric Kendricks pops into that conversation because he's a guy that should be in the conversation for the best middle linebacker in the NFL. That's how good he is. And everybody, I think, acknowledges he's good, but how good? People just sleep on how good he is because he's right there to me with Fred Warner and Levante David and Darius Leonard and Bobby Wagner. Eric Kendricks is in the same category with those guys. Then you look at their secondary. I mean, Harrison Smith has maybe regressed a teeny bit, but he's like ageless because Harrison Smith is still a hell of a football player. So he's really good. Patrick Peterson, I think that Patrick Peterson is not the Patrick Peterson that can sit down and play man on the number one receiver the way he was doing in 2013 and 2014 and 2015 when he was maybe the best corner in the NFL, probably the best corner post Revis, but he's still really, really good. And Mike Zimmer, they play a lot of cover too. They do a lot of different things from split safety, and he's going to be able to do that. So schematically, Mike Zimmer is going to help out Patrick Peterson. He's going to be good. And then the last name to watch out for, and he's a guy who played really well as a rookie for them, is Cam Dantzler. He played really well as a rookie. He was one of the few bright spots on a defense that really struggled last year. When you add all this talent back, and if his level of play stays the same, this Vikings defense is going to be one of the 10 best in the NFL. You add that to the fact that they can run the football. They're going to have a really good run game. They improve their offensive line. And Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. He's a pretty good quarterback to go with 2 excellent receivers. Minnesota is really being slept on as a team that's actually very good. And I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl. I do think they have a defined ceiling, but there's no doubt in my mind that they can make the playoffs and possibly win a playoff game.
Definitely. And I think I agreed with most of those points. Like, just going back to the first part of the D-line, so Michael Pierce actually opted out last year due to COVID, and that was supposed to be one of their big pickups. And now they have him back. They bring in Dalvin Tomlinson, who, as you mentioned, both these guys are excellent, against the run. And I think that's why I was hinting at with the Saints, they ran for 6 touchdowns, or Alvin Kamara did, and they get those 2 guys. They also get back Sheldon Richardson. He's coming back. They signed him. So that's 3 new D linemen. Danielle Hunter, who the last 2 seasons had 14.5 sacks, has dominated in the playoffs. He's coming back. That's 4 new defensive linemen that are all really good to great, just coming back. And that's only one position group. I think their linebackers are still going to be what they are. Eric Kendricks is a top 5 linebacker. Anthony Barr is really solid too. And then I think secondary is probably where they got the most upgrades at. Cornerback in general, Patrick Peterson, Rashad Breeland. They bring back Mackenzie Alexander after a year with the Bengals. They have Cam Dantzler. That's 4 dudes right there. And then Harrison Smith, I think you mentioned ageless. I feel like he's just never going to not be good just due to how smart and intelligent he is. And then they also signed Xavier Woods. So I think when you think about teams that have turned over the most and upgraded the most on defense, they might be there from last year because their defense last year was not good, and that's very atypical. If you look at the Zimmer Vikings defense for the last 5 years, they've been top 5, I'd say probably 4 out of those 5 years, last year being the exception. And their third down defense has always been great. I think 2017 it was one of the best in NFL history, considering how great they were. And then like that's just their whole defense. And I don't know about you, but I think he's not a top 5 coach, but I think he's in that upper echelon of top 10, 11 coaches where with this roster, I see no chance they don't make the playoffs bearing a catastrophic injury or just overall choke job, which I guess is possible, but I would not be betting on it.
I agree with you. And then somebody mentioned Jeff Gladney. He's another guy. They drafted him in the end of the first round last year. He was actually the guy they took with the Brandon Ayuk trade. And so that's another person that's in their secondary. He was a little more up and down. I thought Dantzler was better as a rookie, but that's just another name. And you talked about it, right? Third down defense. It's because Zimmer is so creative at creating pressure, and he creates free pass rushing matchups for his pass rushers, whether it's Danielle Hunter or Griffin. The problem was last year they couldn't really cover anybody and they couldn't really rush the passer. Well, one part of that, both of those problems to me are pretty much solved. So I think that honestly the Zimmer defense is going to be really good next year. And stopping the run, I think, is the most important thing. If you look at Zimmer's defenses, the first part of his careers in Minnesota, they had a guy by the name of Linval Joseph that used to be a very impactful run stopper for them. And without Linval Joseph last year, we saw their lack of size up front. Pierce was supposed to be kind of that replacement. As you mentioned, he opted out. So he's kind of a free signing for them this year to go with Dalvin Tomlinson, who is one of the better run-stuffing defensive tackles in the NFL. I mean, the Giants used to stop the run with their front four last year of Dalvin Tomlinson, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and it was sometimes B.J. Hill, sometimes a few other people, but they just had a lot of size up front. That was the point. And now Minnesota has that. So I'm with you. I think you were the one that really has been bringing this up and driving this home since – I want to say since they signed Dalvin Tomlinson in March. You were like, dude, you're sleeping on Minnesota. Minnesota's going to be really good.
I like
so I'm glad we were able to talk about it because the more and more I look at it, I do look at Minnesota's defense and I say there's no way they're not one of the 10 best in the NFL.
Definitely. And I didn't even really touch on their offense, but they drafted two O-linemen in the first 2 rounds, which is just perennially their biggest weakness. You watch them in pass protection and you're surprised Kirk Cousins is still just happy to get out there. And it may be due to him making $30 million a year, but he just gets mauled, just dropping back more than probably 20, 25 times a game, mainly because they run a lot. But, yeah, I'm with you, and we'll see because they made a lot of additions. I think people are a little bit on Zimmer after the first couple of years. So some have even been saying that he might be on the hot seat, especially if he doesn't perform with the current roster that they have. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I think they're clearly the number 2 team in the NFC North. I'd have Packers 1, them 2, and then Bears 3, Lions 4. But I think they are definitively ahead of the Bears, personally speaking. And I'm interested to see, will they live up to it? Because I expect them to be – I don't expect them to win to the division, but I think they could be a 5 or 6 seed pretty easily. I really do.
I agree. And if Rodgers doesn't play, I hate to be that person, but if Rodgers doesn't play, they're the best team in the NFC North.
They really could be. I mean, depending, unless Jordan Love or I guess Justin Fields just turn out to be a franchise quarterback, which you really wouldn't bank on someone making the first start. Yeah, I mean, it's the Vikings division to lose at that point.
I agree. This defense is going to be really good.
Definitely. So that is the Vikings defense, mainly defense. So Vish and I both think they are going to be – I think they'll be a top 8 unit, maybe even higher. Vish is probably in the same boat, somewhere around
top 10,
there.
Yeah.
I like them a lot. Tons of turnover for the good, meaning they're getting more talented people as opposed to losing their entire defense. So yeah. Now we can get on to the main point of the video, and that was just the Q&A part. And we just want you guys to drop in questions. I know you've dropped in a lot, but keep dropping them in. Before we actually start with real questions, Pino is asking what Nolan's doing. We'll get him on soon. We'll do some NBA stuff soon after the finals is over.
Yeah.
And, when everything's done with that, we will get Nolan on. We'll get Nolan on for some NBA rumors with the draft, with free agency. I know there's not that much, but there's a lot of stuff.
We'll do another all-time team draft too. We'll find another one of those $15 challenges and do it so that you guys can tell Noel how he, as usual, once again picked the worst team out of the three of us.
Exactly. Definitely. We can go from the top down.
Yeah, so somebody was asking, are we playing fantasy football? I personally am not. I stopped playing fantasy football. I felt like it was too much of a time commitment. And once I stopped, I kind of liked how my schedule was. But I was thinking about this, and maybe we could implement this. Maybe we can do a Blake and Vish Sports fantasy league with a lot of you guys, and maybe have like a 10-team league. I don't know how we would implement it, but it's maybe something we could think about doing if you guys would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, that would be really fun, honestly. Just getting 10 people, whoever's interested, and maybe, I don't know, putting something on the line to keep people motivated to play. But yeah, that'd be really fun to, get both of us in a league with you guys. And if it was only 10 people, I'm sure there'd be enough that would actually want to join. So yeah, we'll definitely think about that. And I am doing fantasy football this year. Last year ended up third in the league. Tough. Didn't even get to see Alvin Kamara's championship game or have his 6 touchdown game in the championship, but that was tough to hear.
Yeah, and then
was from Syria. Did you hear that Sherman 9/11 call? I've been kind of keeping up. I haven't really read into the details of the call. I know that on Twitter.
We literally I saw it get tweeted out by my sports update literally right before we went live. I mentioned it. I've not heard it, but yeah, it did sound a little bit disturbing. So I hope Richard Sherman's doing okay. I'm a fan of Richard Sherman, both as an athlete and a person. So it's tough to hear.
And we didn't decide to cover this topic. We thought about it. Just there's not all the details and stuff, but if you guys check out Grant Cohen's channel, I know he's done this topic ad nauseum today. I think on 3 different live streams. So if you want to get thoughts on it, they will be there for you.
Definitely. My other thing is I would like to hear all the facts.
Exactly.
Before. Because I still think it's a really bizarre story. I still am not even 100% sure, and we get new details every hour. So I'm sure by 2 days from now, we'll probably know this entire story because I see no way that Richard Sherman lets it go without his side of the story being known as soon as he's available to do so, and not currently apprehended as he currently is.
Definitely. I thought this was another great one to pull, or this was the first, I guess, real topic to talk about. So Eddie asks, what do you think is a successful rookie season for Trey? I'm gonna push this one off to Vish first because he is the 49ers aficionado. So Vish, what would you classify as a successful rookie season for Trey Lance?
I think the successful rookie season for Trey Lance, I don't actually think it's result-based because I think there's too many results that could go wrong. And we've seen quarterbacks who frankly haven't played that well get results. Jared Goff has won a lot of games in the NFL. He's played really poor football the last 2 years, especially. So to me, it's not, if the 49ers go 13-4, Trey Lance had a successful rookie season. I don't even think it's award-based either. I don't care if he wins rookie of the year or anything. To me, it's more of a visual base of when I go back and watch him and I listen and I see everything that he does as a quarterback. Does he look like a franchise quarterback? And that to me is more subjective, but it's also when you watch him, is he standing in the pocket and making the big time throws that franchise quarterbacks make? Is he making plays with his athleticism? Is he making plays with his mind? Is he executing what's there? Those are the questions to me that would make him a successful rookie. And, he could do all of those things and have crappy numbers and lose a bunch of games, but that could be, because the surroundings around him dissipate very quickly. A lot of guys get hurt, and now he's got no protection, no receivers. Debo, Brandon Ayuk are hurt, so he has no Trent Williams gets hurt. This is just a worst case scenario, but Trey Lance could still play really well, and we just wouldn't know it. So, like you can look at Tua's stats last year. Tua's stats are pretty good, actually. They're pretty close to Joe Burrow. You go back and watch both of those quarterbacks, it's not really close on which one is clearly playing better football. Joe Burrow looked just a step above from Tua last year. So that's what I want to see from Trey Lance. To me, a successful rookie season of him showing that physically and mentally he is the quarterback and the franchise quarterback of the future.
Interesting. So I'll take it from two ways. I guess the first way, which would be visually, because I think visually and how he's actually playing, I have no worries about his running. I think he'll be effective at running. I feel like that translates pretty easily. I mean, you look at the guys from college football recently that have been as good of runners as he has, and you look at Lamar, you think of Kyler Murray, Josh Allen was really good at running as well. And those guys have all been able to do that. Even Herbert's a decent runner. So I'm not really too worried about the running aspect. I guess the throwing aspect for me is he has had limited throws in college, which is kind of the one thing on him that kind of puts an, I guess, asterisk maybe on, when you look at his stats and you look at his body of work, no interceptions, super efficient. That's the one thing that people will point to and say, well, we haven't seen it over a long period of time. And I honestly don't think you've talked about this a lot. I don't think he'll be a type of quarterback doing what Joe Burrow had to do and dropping back 40 to 50 times a game. That's just not how the Niners are built at all.
Right.
But being able to consistently throw like 25 to 30 times a game and being efficient passing in that realm, I think that's what to me would say we can build upon this, and this is a really, really good foundation, as opposed to if they were only dropping him back, say, like 15 to 20 times, you'd be a little more concerned and like, why are we not unleashing him more? We traded 2 firsts to trade up to get him. Because I think that's built into it as well. Like, you traded 2 future firsts, and if he's not coming out and looking good, I really do think the 49ers fans aren't going to be the most, willing to like hold his hand to get him to that process. Because this team's built to win now. This is not a team like the Bengals or even the Chargers for that matter they were in a tough spot. Their roster lacked talent as a whole. No, this team is ready. This team, bearing injuries or with a fully healthy or almost fully healthy roster, was in the NFC Championship game. I think the expectations are high due to that.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, they really are.
The Super Bowl, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think that throwing thing is important because you brought up the number of throws, right? And people harp on the number of throws, and you can say, well, he didn't play a season and all of that. The problem is that he didn't have real drop back situations in college as well. He was primarily a play action passer, which is what he's going to do with the 49ers. So all of that is good and well. But you talk about him, can he throw the ball 25 times consistently? Well, he threw the ball 25 plus times, I think 3 times in college, his entire college career. It might be less. He was consistently a 15 to 20 attempts guy in college, which is pretty rare, right? Because they were a very run-first offense, run-heavy offense. He was a integral part of their run game, and that's kind of what I imagine it's going to be with the 49ers. So then it comes down to, like you talked about, those 15 to 25 throws, because I think that's the range he's going to be in. On games when they can really run it, he's going to be at 15. Games where they need to throw it a bit more, he's going to be at 25. Can he be efficient and accurate with all 25 of his throws? Because one of the questions for me when he came out of the draft was, when you watched him, the sample size is so small, and there were so many moments of inconsistency with his efficiency and accuracy throwing the football, where I wasn't sure. Well, because you can't extrapolate the data and say, well, if he threw the ball 35 times, the accuracy concerns would go away, because he only got 15 throws, and you only got to see those 15 throws. And like 10 of them would be good, and then 2 of them would be like really, really bad misses where you would just be confused and you couldn't see, a large sample size to say, oh, no, he's really consistent throwing it, or with his accuracy throwing it to all areas of the field. So that was one of my biggest concerns. So I 100% agree with that as well. The other successful part of his rookie season would be him showing that he can be a consistent and efficient drop back passer. He doesn't have to be that immediately, obviously. They're not going to ask him to be that, and he doesn't have to be that. That's a wrong expectation. But does he show enough growth for you to say 3-4 years from now, which is when that expectation should be there, he can be the kind of quarterback you truly drop back? Because at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things with the NFL is that you need to be able to convert third downs in true drop back situations. That's how you win in the playoffs. And that's how every single one of these quarterbacks that we think are good, it's because they're good drop back passers. What makes Matthew Stafford better than a Kirk Cousins, better than a Derek Carr, better than a even like a Ryan Tannehill? It's not the fact that he's more physically gifted with his arm. He's just better in drop back situations than those guys. And those guys are phenomenal off play action. They're good in drop back situations. Stafford is just better. You have to be able to be a proficient drop back passer. And so we'll see. I don't think he has to be that day one. That's not a fair expectation. But like you said, can he show growth where you can say, okay, 3 years or 2 years from now, he can really do that would be the question.
Definitely. And I'm actually happy you brought up that he needs to win as a drop back passer at some point, because I was going to bring up Lamar Jackson, and a lot of people questioned him in his rookie year and how good is he actually. And once he got into a situation in the playoffs against the Titans when he needed to drop back and throw it, 40, I think he threw it like 50 times in that Titans game. Is he going to be able to do that? And he did struggle. It wasn't very pretty, and he's obviously grown a lot since then. I mean, even from that Chargers game too, like from then to what he did against the Titans this year, I think was incredible growth. And that's kind of the growth you need to see, because you're not going to always play with the lead. It's just unrealistic to expect that. But when you are in a position where, your team is kind of leaning on you to make to throw the ball like 30, 35, 40 times, are you going to show growth? Are you going to be able to actually do that? Because if you're not, I mean, your team's very limited, because basically what you're saying at that point is your team has to be in a winning position at all times.
Yeah, and just piggyback on that, I think the most important thing, and the reason I don't even think Lamar's a good comparison, is because Greg Roman's poor at scheming up the drop back pass game for Lamar, and his receivers are not the best at winning off man coverage. The Niners have Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, 3 guys that can win in one-on-one situations, especially Kittle and Ayuk, and they have Kyle Shanahan calling the plays. So ideally, Trey Lance is in the ideal situation to show all of these things. I think he ultimately will, but we will see. And I think that's really going to dictate not only the successfulness of his rookie season, but the successfulness of his career. Because at the end of the day, Trey Lance's success is not going to be defined by his first 2 or 3 years and how well he does with this loaded roster. The important thing when you trade 2 first-round picks, swap a third and a third-round pick for a quarterback, is that you expect him to be your starting franchise quarterback for 10 years. You expect him to get a second contract, and you expect him to be that franchise guy for 10 years. 10 years is the goal, and so, in my opinion, at least. So I think that drop-back element will ultimately define the entire success of the entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it'll be something to watch. I think that's kind of one of the main things with the Niners is, whether they go 15-2 or 2-15, does Trey Lance, I think we both agree he'll play at some point this year, does he look like he's a capable drop-back passer? Because if not, then you're going to be you should be concerned.
So I would be concerned, but I think they can win a lot of games even if he doesn't. Because their play action is going to be so good, and you add his running element, I still think they can run the football. Kyle Shanahan's so creative, and their defense is so good. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's not going to be a results thing that defines to me how successful they are. Because I think they can go 14-3 with Trey Lance struggling in the drop back pass game.
Okay, but for the long term of his career, you would
I would personally, I would have question marks, right? I wouldn't be able to deem it like 100% successful, but I could also see them going, 4-13, but Trey Lance looks really good as a drop back passer. His running is there. His play action execution is there. His decision making is all there. And I'd be like, yeah, this guy's the next superstar, even though they just went 4-13 with him and stuff. To me, it's all about how he plays individually, not how the team does around him.
Yeah. I'm interested to see. I think that's probably one of my favorite storylines heading into this year. Like, how can a third overall pick do with a team that is a year off from being in the Super Bowl? And will he get them back there, or maybe is this team, or was that the best the team will be for the foreseeable future? But we will see. Good question though, Eddie. You can go with this one. Vish, job market is looking good. They're struggling to find talent. This is actually very true. If you go to like pretty much any place, you will see a now hiring sign. So that is a really good call out, honestly.
Yeah, appreciate it, Swan Song. Hopefully I get that all locked up soon.
The next question comes from Brandon. Thoughts on the 17-game season? What do you think is the perfect balance of preseason and regular season in terms of games? Vish, I'll defer to you on this one again.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think that the 17-game season plus the 7 playoff teams, I think it automatically favors whoever gets the number 1 seed. I don't see any possibility of anyone who doesn't get the number 1 seed and has a bye before week 10 going to the Super Bowl. And here's why. It's just too much football in a row. If you have a week 6 bye and you have this stacked roster and you end up with the number 2 seed, guess what, Blake? You're not winning the Super Bowl that year. Because there's no way teams are going to be able to travel and go through that brutal schedule of 10 straight weeks of football because you play the 6 through 17. That's 11 straight weeks of football. Then you have to play the wild card game. Then you have to play the divisional game. And then a championship game, if you get there, of which the championship game will most likely be on the road and you're the number 2 seed. It's just an impossible ask to me. I really hate it. I think it's bad for the players. I think the NFL has screwed them over. I think with earlier buys and you're adding a week and adding a playoff team and removing an extra bye, I think it's bad. I think with this format, they should have just cut one weekend off. After the season, there should just be 1 week bye for everybody. That's how I look at it. I do not think this was smart. I think the collective bargaining agreement, I still can't believe the players signed this particular iteration of it. I think it's very poor for them. And in terms of balance, I thought the old balance was great. 16 games, 6 playoff teams. I thought it was probably as fair as you can get, but more games equals more money. So,
yeah, I partially agree, partially disagree. If they were gonna keep it how it was, I thought that was perfect. 16 games, you play 4 from your division, 6 division games, 4 from another division in your conference, 4 from another division outside your conference, and then just the team that lined up with you in the standings from those other divisions. That makes so much sense. It's so perfect. The schedules align so well. And then also with the stats, I don't know how, is 4,000 yards going to be the metric now, or is it going to be 4,200? Is rushing and receiving going to be 1,000 yards, or is it going to be 1,100? Those to me are kind of annoying too, and just how we view stats and players' seasons, because it used to be 16 games, you kind of get a rough estimate, but now 1,300 yards. Well, what if someone gets 300 yards in week 17 and it's I don't know. I just hate how that's going to get messed with, and then also just the divisions too, or the division games and how they play the games. Those two things I don't like. I also just hated that they added 7 teams to the playoffs. The 6 made so much sense. It really did.
I agree. I don't like these changes. I mean, it's not mean I'm going to stop watching football. Absolutely not. I'm going to watch all 17 games for a lot of different teams, and I'm probably going to watch every single playoff game. You can bet on that. I do think it is a little bit. And I think with records and stuff, it is a little bit where a lot of records are going to be broken now, and a lot of stats are going to be inflated. And I do think it's going to change, because when you're making all-time comparisons and all of that, you can't really use the statistical element, because it's very difficult to extrapolate data from 16 games to 17 games, because you're taking averages, and those averages are going to be smaller than. And you're not going to be able to include outliers, and outliers are going to be included in the data for players that do play the 17 games. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think there's a perfect balance of it, and I think it's really bad for the players personally. I think it's really bad. Any early bye, week 6, week 7 bye, it is bad for the players playing 10 straight weeks of football and having no bye. I mean, the best example of this is the 49ers from 2019. They had the week 4 bye, and they crawled to the end of the season. And they were that Greenlaw hit away from not just going to the Super Bowl. They might have been out in the first round if they had to go to Philly. And it was for nothing else than the Niners' bodies were just fatigued. But then they got the 2 weeks off, and all of a sudden Quan Alexander comes back, and Jaquiski Tartt comes back, and Dee Ford comes back, and Nick Bosa's fresh, and Eric Armstead's fresh, and DeForest Buckner's fresh. And they killed the Vikings. That defense didn't play like that for the last 6 weeks of that season. And then you come back, give them the week off, and all of a sudden they're destroying a good Minnesota Vikings team. So to me, that's the perfect example of how much of an impact that bye makes. And I think we're going to see a lot of really good teams falter solely because it's just too much football in a row.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my part I disagreed with you with, like, if it is 7 teams, I do kind of like the idea of just one team having a bye, in the sense that that 1 seed is so precious, and you are just grinding out every possible way to win it. You remember in the past, like, if teams locked up a bye, it would make week 17 meaningless, as they would just rest players. Now, I'd say it's better just for those teams, but I guess in the spirit of wanting more competitive football, like, week 17 and 16 means so much more, because getting that bye, you will go to the extreme.
So I disagree, because I don't think it changes anything. We saw the same thing. Kansas City rested players this year.
Yeah, but the Packers game meant a lot.
That's true, but I mean,
there was 3 teams that could have possibly got the 1 seed.
Yeah, but I still think but there could be, if you remember 2011, the Packers, the Saints, and the 49ers, the Packers locked up 15-1. They rested, played Matt Flynn. He had 6 touchdowns in the game, and he got a big contract from Seattle. But the Niners-Saints game for that 2 seed, the Niners week 17 game was every bit as important as the Saints game, because they both finished 13-3. So to me, it's going to remain similar. I think that only 1 or 2 teams are still going to have a shot for the bye, and it'll be as competitive as it's been personally. But I think that's a fair way to look at it. I just don't think it's worth enough to do this, this change and put that on the players.
I agree. Like, I think the old system was better. I think the fact that there is only one seed does make it, I guess, more. Like, you really want the 1 seed more than in the past, because more in the past, like, you were okay with getting a 2 seed. You were completely fine with that. But we'll see how it ends up. I mean, this year the number 1 seed in the NFC didn't go. The number 1 seed in the AFC did go. So we'll see how it does shake up. But that's a good question. I think we both like the 16-game season more. And to your point, the collective bargaining agreement, I'm with you. I cannot believe the players actually did sign that. Because if you think about it, it could end up being 2 more games if you become the 7th seed. So, and that is a lot of wear and tear. So all of that for getting some drugs free, I don't know. I'm not a player, so I can't really speak to that. But from an outsider's perspective, it does seem like they did get the short end of the stick in some ways. Now, this could mean contracts will be bigger, though, because there will be more revenue in the league. So that, in that sense, contracts might be bigger. But
my thing is that from my perspective, those things should happen for the players without them having to sacrifice.
Yeah,
like, you shouldn't have to put in that extra for bigger contracts in this case. To me, the normal growth of rate of inflation and all of that, these contracts should grow for these players. And they keep making statements about making the game safer, and they've taken strides to do that. But to me, this inherently makes football more dangerous. I mean, if you want to make the game safer, I think the first thing that should be done is Thursday night football should be gone. But Thursday night football exists. I mean, look at the 49ers this year. They have a scheduled Thursday night game loss. There's no way the Niners are going to go cross country to Tennessee on a short week and win that game. That's a scheduled loss unless Tennessee is a god-awful team. But if Tennessee is a decent team, that's a free win. No West Coast team is going to go on a short week cross country and win that game. So
it'll be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like, they say the NFL says the right things. Like, they're not going to intentionally say they're making the game more dangerous. They're going to say, we're always striving to do better. Change can always happen. And I think in some aspects that's true, but as you pointed out, adding an extra game, potentially 2, does not make the game more safe in any way, shape, or form. It just means more collisions, more hits. So, Yeah,
I think maybe you add the second one, but then you have a second bye and you just extend the NFL season, maybe something like that. But one bye, 17 games, 7 playoff teams, one team getting a bye in the playoffs. To me, it's a recipe for disaster, personally.
definitely. But that was a good question, Brandon.
Yeah, always has good questions, my man.
Spent a lot of time on that one. We can
I wanted to ask you this real quick. What are you scared of, Blake?
I don't know. Probably I think snakes are terrifying. Like in the wild, like a big snake.
Oh yeah, that is kind of
scary. Like a slow death, you know.
Yeah, I think I would run. Run if I don't know if I would run from a snake. It might freeze me if I saw like a cobra.
Actually, alligators, because those things can go like 20 miles an hour. Run.
I agree. Alligators can
climb.
Be scary.
They can climb fences and stuff.
Tigers is another one. Yeah. I think tigers meeting a tiger. Holy cow, that'd be scary.
Definitely.
I'm gonna scroll through. Do you want to take this one from my man Pinor?
I would not have much to add to the conversation, to be honest with you. It's been a while since I've seen Patrick Willis, and
me too.
I didn't really watch much of I knew how great Luke Kuechly was, but I wasn't avidly watching Panthers games. I've only heard some crazy stories about him.
For me, it's very hard to debate the specifics of both players without spending time to go back and watch them, because I don't remember, I know what they were in all of that, but it's really hard to do this debate without specifics. I think maybe doing a Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner debate's easier because they're fresh in your mind, you know exactly what they do. But I maybe we can, Pinor, this is a really good question. Maybe on a different Q&A, if you ask us again, we'll be more equipped to answer this because we'll go back and check both out and have strong opinions. The Niners fan in me just wants to say Patrick Willis, but this is definitely a really close debate because I do think Kuechly, the one thing I can say off my top of my head is I thought Kuechly always had better ball skills than Patrick Willis in coverage.
Yeah, and it is hard to compare the two when they both were getting first-team All-Pros just year in and year out.
Yeah.
They were truly the best of their time. And I want to say Ray Lewis was probably definitely out of his prime in the late 2000s, early 2010s, right? When Bowman was.
Yeah. Ray Lewis was way out of his prime. I think his prime ended 2008, I want to say. As Patrick Willis ascended, Ray Lewis kind of started going now. This is just about what college we go to. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have asked this, so I thought we could just answer it here real quick.
Yeah.
Blake, I think you're repping your school right there.
University. I go to the University of Iowa. Big Luka Garza fan. Great football team sometimes when we had Nate Stanley.
And CJ Beathard.
Yeah, we just are a quarterback factory. We just get developed quarterbacks. Sam Petras is our current quarterback. Huge arm. He has a huge arm, but that leads to a lot of overthrows or throws a little too high. But
yeah, I go to University of Illinois at Chicago. And yeah, I don't have a lot of description. It's a commuter school. It's one of the University of Illinois, but it's not Urbana-Champaign. It's the one at Chicago. And yeah, I mean, I study computer science. Not that interesting to a lot of people. Pretty interesting to me. And Blake obviously studies accounting, so.
Yep. I just wanted to point this out. No Don Burr today.
Yeah, I miss Don Burr.
We'll see him in the comments in the near future because he would have liked the TJ Hawkinson conversation, I'm sure.
Blake playing Indiana Jones in the reboot. Dang. I don't think Blake's seen Indiana Jones. Have you?
No.
My man Kyle Neely out here talking about Tua being a good runner. Who said Tua's a good runner?
I said Herbert was a good runner.
Yeah, I don't remember anyone saying Tua was a good runner. And even Herbert, he's more of a really good scrambler than runner. Scrambler and runner are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like Russell Wilson is a hell of a scrambler, a pretty good runner. Lamar Jackson is really good at both. But yeah, I thought I saw a couple of questions. Ooh, I like this one. Is Blake scared of Justin Fields running the division for the next decade?
No, because the Bears are cursed at quarterbacks.
I'm sorry. I just love asking. I love that these questions are there. Please asking more questions. Step by 7. Yeah, I'm going to the Week 8 Bears 49ers game. I know Grant, that's one of the away games he's covering. Blake might pull up to that game too. He's really interested in watching the Jimmy Garoppolo, Andy Dalton game on Halloween, right?
I can guarantee you that it will be Lance versus Fields. This happened. I didn't point this out, but someone I know pointed this out, and it was I want to say either a Thursday or Monday night game, and it was the Browns and it was the Jets in 2018.
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor magically gets injured, and Baker Mayfield has his first start against Sam Darnold.
He didn't start. He came in at the end of the first quarter,
end of the first,
and he lit it up. Baker Mayfield lit it up in that game. He was throwing rockets.
Correct. Yeah, so it'll be Lance versus Fields. So if you're a Niners fan, you get to watch that matchup.
Yeah, I'm a big troll. If you didn't know that, and I was trolling when I said it's a Garoppolo Dalton game. Yeah. I doubt it will end up being that. Delondis Green, I watch Grant every day and came to check you guys out. I'm impressed, enjoying your show. Well, Delondis, we really appreciate you. I mean, Grant is a very tough act to follow. I mean, he's the GOAT. He's Grant Cohn. So we really appreciate that you're enjoying this. My man Rahul with this great question, because this gives me an excuse to talk about my favorite team in the NBA. And where's Don Burr? Detroit versus everybody. I'm a Detroit Pistons fan. I need Don Burr in here to back me up. But Blake, who's your favorite team in the NBA?
I'm like a Bulls fan, but it's not like a crazy. I'm not a big fan. Like nothing too crazy. Just root for the hometown team.
Yeah, and Stacey King's announcing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best part of the team. I wish I was a Wisconsin fan right now, being able to root for the Bucks, but just the Packers. Just the Packers.
Honestly, though, I will say this: living up around Chicago, I know a lot of Packers fans. I know very few Packers-Bucks fans.
Yeah, there's not many Bucks fans. There really isn't.
David Flores with actually one of the most interesting questions here. He's asking Kawhi Leonard recently just got ACL surgery. I don't think he's out for the season because from what I read, it was only a partial tear.
Correct.
Yeah. Which is what the injury, if you remember, Ryan Tannehill in Miami had a partially torn ACL, refused to get surgery, and then tore his ACL fully in the middle of the season. This was the Adam Gase years, the year after they made the playoffs. So I do think people were saying there's a chance he comes back. I'm not 100% sure on this. But the second part of this question is they have vets who want to win now. Reggie Jackson, DeMarcus Cousins, Nick Batum will be free agents. What's next for the Clippers?
I can start with this. I think Kawhi, he'll come back. I think the partial tear, he'll come back. But I am concerned. Just my bad. In general, just like he's had knee problems a lot, and that does he'll load manage the whole regular season and then play in the postseason. But I'm starting to get a little concerned with him and like his availability because. It's been a few times recently that he's been consistently injured, and although with the Raptors he was able to will through, like he was laboring, and I don't know if he can keep doing that, especially if he has to play 40+ minutes a night every single playoff game. I'm concerned for Kawhi because I like him a lot. I think he's definitely a top 5 NBA player, and it's not as fun. The playoffs aren't as fun without him because he's just going to go for 40 on stupid efficiency multiple times. As for the rest of the team, I'm worried about how they're going to sign all these guys. I think DeMarcus will be cheap. Nick Batum should be cheap, but Reggie Jackson's an interesting case. Should he be cheap? You want to say yes, but the way he was playing at the end of the in the postseason, I wouldn't be surprised if one of those mid-tier, like 8 to 12 teams, or like that in that range of teams, threw him more money than they should. But if they get everyone back, I would honestly take the Clippers in the West. I had them going to the finals this year. They went to 6 games with the Suns, and there was a couple games that, that DeAndre Ayton dunked with that second left. That changes the course of the whole series, and they didn't have their best player, and they get him back. I think they could be they are the most talented team in the West with him. Now, the Nuggets will be back. The Lakers will be back. The Suns are still going to be good, but I like this Clippers team a lot, and they have 2 guys who I think are stars. One of them's a superstar. Paul George proved how good he was without Kawhi this offseason, so they got to sign the vets. And Ballmer, I guess, will just be paying insane amount of luxury tax because they're paying Luke Kennard and Marcus Morris like $14 million each annually, and that's a lot of money for one guy who's a fringe starter, like a 6th man, and the other guy's like an 8th or 9th guy.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. So first, if Kawhi Leonard stays, so I'm not sure if Kawhi Leonard will stay. I don't even know how to read Kawhi Leonard, but I'm with you on the knee problems. If you remember the diagnosis when he left San Antonio after the entire, he sat out the 72 games, all of that was that he had knee tendinosis, which from what I was reading and everything, it's basically like he has a degenerative knee and he has knee issues. That's right. And Dwayne Wade had a degenerative knee. So that's why he was sitting out so much for load management. And if you remember, actually, the Raptors championship, one of the most things forgotten is that Kawhi Leonard played the Bucks series halfway through the Bucks series from game 3 and on, and the entire NBA Finals hurt. He was basically managing his body throughout and limping. Yeah, he was laboring. He definitely lost some lift, and there was a drop off in his performance compared to how he played versus Philly. So I do agree, and not just that, Kawhi Leonard's first playoff series as the solo star in San Antonio, which I still think to this day is the best playoffs that Kawhi Leonard has played, the 2017 playoffs. Yes. People forget how good he was. He was special versus Memphis in that first round, and he played very well versus Houston when he did play. He had the ankle issue throughout that playoffs until Zaza Pachulia was just dirty. He had a dirty basketball play. There was no need to take 3 extra steps to get his foot and contest that close to Kawhi Leonard. It was a dirty play, and he got hurt. So I'm with you. I am worried about Kawhi Leonard's injuries because when healthy, to me, this is one of the 3 best players in the NBA. There's no doubt about it. So I'm worried about Kawhi Leonard's overall health and injury, especially given at the high level he plays in the playoffs. In terms of what's next for the Clippers, I think Reggie Jackson is gone. I'm with you. I think the only way Reggie Jackson stays is if he takes less money because he's so emotionally attached to the Clippers.
Yeah, and it could happen. Realistically, it could happen. I would not bet against him leaving for a ton of money, but it's certainly a possibility.
But otherwise, I think Reggie Jackson, based on what he showed in the playoffs, some team that's looking to contend is going to throw a lot of money Reggie Jackson's way because he made a lot of big shots and he played out of his mind in these playoffs. DeMarcus Cousins, I don't think he's that important to bring back, honestly, for the Clippers. Yeah. I still think his scoring numbers in the Phoenix series were misleading. He bullied Dario Saric, but he still was poor defensively throughout that series. He's always been immobile. And DeMarcus Cousins fouls, frankly, way too much. DeMarcus Cousins is the kind of center that if you play him for more than 20 minutes a night, you're going to spend 2 quarters in the bonus for a very long time because DeMarcus Cousins is going to pick up 2-3 fouls very quickly. So that's another thing. Nick Batum, I think, is important, but I also think Nick Batum can be replaceable. I think that they had a lot of wings. I think Nick Batum was especially important because of the injuries they went through last year and because of his versatility, playing a lot of different roles. But if they're a healthier basketball team, I do think they'll be fine without Nick Batum. The bottom line is if Kawhi is out for an extended period of time and let's say they bring 2 out of the 3 guys back, I think they can definitely be a contender for one of those 6 to 8 spots in the West. Paul George, Ty Lue's a hell of a coach and a good team. They could be that. I mean, we saw how competitive they were with Utah and with Phoenix without Kawhi. They just play a smart style of basketball. But I do think that with a healthy Kawhi Leonard, with Reggie Jackson back, you could probably mark them down as outside of the Nets next year's prohibitive favorites to make the finals. But we'll see. There's a lot that needs to happen, and I'll be interested to see how they approach this offseason. And real quick, in regards to Kawhi's injury, because I'm unaware, there were other people that posted. So apparently the partial tear has the same it still has the same recovery time. I did not know this. And the best case scenario is 7 months, but the worst case scenario is up to 9 months. So I'm assuming if he got his surgery in July, we're seeing Kawhi Leonard next year, maybe March. Maybe they get him healthy enough to make a playoff run. But it'll be interesting then to see his contract situation, because this is a guy now with 3 or 4 injuries in the last 4 or 5 years. He's obviously a supermax player, but do you want to give Kawhi Leonard, a 5-year, $150 million contract, $170 million contract that next offseason, knowing that he's not going to play throughout the regular season likely next year, if this is true, and he's an injury risk in general?
Yeah, I think he'll be there. I really do. He wants to be in LA. I think that's the part that people sometimes forget. Like, if he wanted to win, he could definitely leave and go somewhere better, but he wants to be in LA. When he was on the Spurs, he said, I want to be in LA. They traded him to the Raptors. They won a championship. They had the makings of a team that could run the East for a couple of years. And he still wanted to leave because he wants to be in LA. And I think that's the factor that, for me, just says he'll undoubtedly be back just because he loves the city so much. And I want to say that's where he grew up, or he has very, very strong connections to. But I think he will live in LA just because of the fact he likes it there so much. And yeah, I mean, maybe 5 years is a rich contract or rich amount of time. But I think if you give him 3 years, that would be more reasonable. But I'm with you. If you gave him 5 years, like, he is super, super injury prone. And we saw what happened to Dwayne Wade, right?
Yeah, but then the question is, would he take 3 years? Because this might be his last chance to re-up and get the full payday.
I mean, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars.
What's wrong with making another $50, $60 million?
I mean, I don't think money for him is like the main motivation. I think
that's true. That's true.
Like, he literally just wants to be in LA. That's the only thing he cares about, is what it seems from our perspective.
Yeah, so I think we can maybe take one more question or 2 more questions. Mm-hmm. I actually really liked this one. Brandon Vincent's been killing it. Brandon, we appreciate the questions, but do either of you believe in asterisk championships in any sport due to injury or circumstance? Do you believe that you can only play who's in front of you?
You want to go first?
This is a really hard question to answer. Okay, sure. I can go first. I was going to let you take this because I do think
I don't care. I can go first too.
So I wouldn't. All right, you want to go? Then go ahead. Yeah, take this.
Yeah. Like, I don't put like a severe asterisk on it. Like, I'm going to give this an example because this is something that I think this championship I think about a lot, and that's the 2015 Warriors. The Warriors were playing. I don't even care about the first 3 rounds, although apparently Vish pointed out to me that their the starting point guard, was injured in all those rounds.
Yeah, they played the Pelicans without Drew Holiday, and the more important thing is they played the Memphis Grizzlies without Mike Conley Jr. for the last 2 games of that series.
Yes. Okay. So that, like, I don't even think about that, but I think about the 2015 championship, and this was the Cavs versus the Warriors, right? The Cavs lost Kyrie Irving, and they lost Kevin Love. And I want to say on the promo, or someone who was being highlighted on the Cavs, was Matthew Dellavedova. And the Cavs went up 2-1. They lost 4-2. Brown played amazing, as good as you can. Andre Iguodala won the Finals MVP. The short part of this is that I will think of that championship forever as it would have ended severely differently had those injuries not occurred. I don't know if the Warriors would have won. And now there's other times, like even the Raptors series when KD and Clay got injured, like people would put an asterisk on that. Or I don't really do anything with 2016 through 2018. Like, the Warriors were just better. And then the Cavs, like, I don't really consider the Andrew Bogut thing to be like something like it definitely had an effect, but it's not like, oh, this Cavs team was fraudulent or like they didn't deserve. But like that 2015 series, like, you cannot tell me that those two injuries did not have a severe outcome on the end of the championship, because I think it would have ended entirely different. I think the Cavs would have won, and it's tough for me to like say that they wouldn't have, considering that their second best player was like Matthew Dellavedova in a championship.
Timofey Mozgov.
Okay, sorry, Timofey Mozgov. Yeah,
J.R. Smith. They had a lot of different players that were the second best player for points in that series. Yes. But the point is, I don't know if I would put an asterisk. An asterisk sounds harsh. Who am I to assign an asterisk or anything? But I do think it leaves me always wanting in terms of conversation, because I can frame it to you like this. Like now that we know the result of the 2016 finals, let's say when the Warriors were up 3-1, the Steph Curry got hurt. Okay, Steph Curry gets hurt. The Warriors are up 3-1 in 2016. Steph Curry gets hurt, and the Cavs come back in 2016 and win that series 4-3. We would constantly say that the only reason they came back is because Steph Curry got hurt. But looking back, now we know that they actually were able to do it with a healthy Steph Curry, right? They were able to overcome the 3-1 deficit when Steph Curry was healthy. So I think that there is two ways to look at it. Like there is a possibility in 15 that the Warriors could have beaten the healthy Cavs, but then it's hard to imagine that because of how LeBron plays. So I think the asterisk isn't tough. I think what it leaves me at is it leaves me wanting. Like I feel like I'm never able to understand whether it leaves me feeling like we didn't get to see the best of the results. Like for example, like in 2018 when CP3 got hurt, there's a good chance the Warriors win games 6 and 7 with Iguodala back and playing for them, when CP3 is healthy. But because CP3 got hurt and did not play game 6 and 7 with that messed up hamstring, when the Rockets were up, I want to say they were up 3-2. They were up 3-2. It leaves us sitting here thinking, man, the Warriors dodged a bullet. And so that's where I think I wouldn't put an asterisk on it, but I would say, like, come on, like, there is a little bit of context required. And same thing applies for the 19 championship. That Toronto Raptors team was a serious defensive basketball team. Maybe one of the best defensive basketball teams we've seen in the last 10 years when you look at their starting lineup, which consisted of all defensive team members who have made all defensive teams in their career. Kyle Lowry, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, obviously two-time defensive player of the year. Marcus Gasol, defensive player of the year. Serge Ibaka was a defensive all-NBA first-team defense. Pascal Siakam made an all-NBA defensive team. So they had a stacked defensive team, right? So there's a chance that they could have beaten them with Clay and KD healthy that whole series. There is a real possibility because that Warriors team was really just those four guys, Iguodala and nothing else. But unfortunately, because they got hurt, we look at it and we say there is an asterisk. So I wouldn't say there's an asterisk, but I do think there is a little bit of it leaves I would say it constantly leaves a question mark on that championship because you're never sure if they could have done it if that other team was healthy.
Yeah, that's I think a more like fair and maybe objective point of looking at it. Like that one specifically, like, yeah, you could say if KD and Clay were healthy, they would have like won or whatever, or wanting them to see if they could do it. But I also go back to just like the sheer fact that like what they had to come over in that Sixers series. Like that team was a borderline team, the 76ers team. They had 3 or 4 legitimately really good like all-star caliber players, and I say, okay, like this team, like what is bad? I guess the term is like battle tested, and they went through like real adversity to actually get there.
Right.
And I guess I'd point to 2015 and say like, okay, they played the Grizzlies. Conley wasn't there, and then they played against like Steph Curry was going against Matthew Dellavedova. Like, that is such a drastic difference that like I don't know.
That's the same argument that's going to be made this year if the Phoenix Suns win the title. Anthony Davis was hurt, Kawhi Leonard got hurt, and Jamal Murray wasn't even available for the series. So that's going to be the same argument made for Phoenix because they went series by series. And I mean, as well as Giannis has been playing, there's no way Giannis is 100% with a hyperextended knee, right? Like, dude, I saw the way his knee bent. Like, Giannis is the freakiest of
Yeah.
freaks. He's playing out of his mind. There's no way Giannis is 100%. So that same argument to me is going to exist for the Phoenix Suns because they went series by series, catching break after break. But then at the same time, you have to look at it and say, well, Phoenix is also a really good basketball team. They were a top offensive and defensive team this year in the NBA. They were the second seed. Could they have beaten all of these teams healthy? Possibly. It's just really difficult to stomach when you're an objective viewer of the sport when they're beating all these teams unhealthy.
And here's something that you brought up, like the Giannis injury. Like, I would not even hold that like as a good thing for the Suns just because of how good he's playing. Similarly, do you remember the Clippers series when Luka had like an injured neck in like game 7 or whatever, game 6, 7?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was still scoring. He was still dropping like 30-point triple doubles on like hyper efficiency. It's like, yeah, he was injured, but how hindered really was he considering he was able to do what he's been doing?
But then you ask the question of what would he have been able to do if he's healthy? Like, would Giannis be giving him 50 right now?
Giannis hasn't dropped. Did he drop 40 back-to-back games against the Nets or the other teams they faced? I don't think he did.
No, I don't think he's ever done this in the playoffs. I don't personally remember him. Maybe in the first round, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, and there's more good questions in there. But yeah, I do look at it. I think it's more for NBA just because like your star player getting hurt in NBA means a lot more than like NFL. Because NFL, you know, like teams win with injuries all the time. I think the Packers had in 2010, they had like 15 to 20 people on IR. But they're definitely, you know.
The Packers, if you remember in 2010, the only reason they were a wild card team is because they didn't get healthy until the last 3-4 weeks of that season. Yeah. So
in that season, there was never a point where they were down by double digits. It was I think it was 7 points. It was either 7 points or double digits. So they were never at a point where they were in a 2-score game, like losing. Like that team was insane. Yeah, that team was incredible.
Real quick, to me, this is an easy answer. I thought yes. I thought James Harden was robbed. I thought that was one of the best regular season performances I've seen. The dude had 32 straight 30-point games. I think they were 21-11 in those games, I want to say. And he had Kenneth Faried and Austin Rivers and PJ Tucker and those guys. That was his starting lineup for a lot of those games. Eric Gordon was out. Chris Paul was out. So, yeah, absolutely, I thought he was the MVP. They were the 4th seed in the West with half their team injured for half the year. And dude was averaging 36.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was one of the bigger robberies of recent times. Some would say 2017, although I think that was not as like – I think 2017 could have been argued either way. I think 2019 it was definitively Harden. He had a stretch of 3 months where he was averaging 40 points.
Yeah.
This year, people were, you know, the craze was Steph averaging, I want to say 37 for – it was either 37 or 40. I think it was
37 in the month of February, and he was
37
insane.
for 1 month on – it was better efficiency than what Harden had. But Harden was averaging 40 for 3 months. But that wasn't
Harden
good enough.
My bad.
Yeah, that wasn't good enough. And they were like a 4 seed. I think you were going to point
that. And Harden was his team's primary ball distributor too. Steph Curry wasn't averaging 9 assists a game like James Harden was. Not to mention the other thing I think that's important is Steph was going on an insane streak this year. I think he got to 13 or 14. I think he got to 14 or 15 30-point games in a row. Like, he was insane, which all the more reason the fact that this man got to 32. Like, he got to 32 because what Steph did this year was special. But then you realize, holy cow, James Harden did not only what Steph did, but did it like 15 more times, 17 more times. That is insane.
Yeah, and Giannis had a great season. I think it was more of like that was Giannis's first season of like really erupting, and I think he had the media narrative more so than Harden did because Harden had been good for a sustained amount of time, and I think it's the same reason like LeBron hasn't won MVPs since what, like
2013.
Yeah,
13.
I think he's been regarded as the best player in the league for the whole 2010s, but he didn't win a single MVP, and that's partly voter fatigue, and then other guys, having a one-off season where they were just that good, a la Russell Wilson. Or not Russell
Westbrook.
Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, but to me the Westbrook one in 17, like you mentioned, was a little more fair. The guys, in a spacing league, a league that's built on shooting, the best shooter on that team was Alex Abrinas. They started a starting lineup, and this is criminal. They started a starting lineup. Their 82 games starting lineup was Russell Westbrook, who's not the best shooter, as we know, though that was his best shooting season of his career. Andre Roberson, who has I've quoted this many times. Yeah. Stephen A. Smith calls his offense offensive. What's his name? Victor Oladipo, who before that season, I know everybody, even though Victor Oladipo credits Russ for helping him erupt in Indiana, everybody says, wow, Russ held down Victor Oladipo. But Victor Oladipo on the Thunder was pretty close to what Victor Oladipo was on the Magic. Just saying. Domantas Sabonis is a rookie who I think he was like the 13th overall pick. So what expectation do you have from a 13th overall pick as a rookie? And Taj Gibson started actually 8-10 games for them. And then Steven Adams, who can't shoot. So that was their starting lineup. And Russell Westbrook, I think, won 48 games and was the 6th seed in the West. To me, that was MVP level. Now, he gave up his career because I think that he sacrificed his entire body for that season, the effort he put in. But I thought that was an MVP season.
Definitely. Yeah, and just to kind of hone it in, it's not that Giannis wasn't good. He was really, really good.
Historic.
Yeah, it's just I thought what Harden did was more impressive. Now, that's not to say Giannis didn't even deserve it one bit, because there's definitely an argument to be made for Giannis winning it. I thought it should have been Harden, but Giannis came away with it, and the rest is history. But I think the bottom line is Harden should have how many? Does he have one MVP, I want to say?
Yeah, he has one, but I think to me, he should have 2015. I understand Steph was special. They won 60-plus games, but the players voted James Harden that year, and that 2015 Rockets team, in my opinion, was vastly overrated to be the number 2 seed in the West. He should have that. He should definitely have 2019, in my opinion, for sure. I think he should have at least 3. 2019 James Harden in the regular season was unbelievable. For them to be the 4th seed, it's to me, in terms of offensive scoring, Kobe, 2006 when he averaged 35 is the only season that compares. That was, and Kobe took a very, very less than team to the playoffs that year with Smush Parker, Kwame Brown. I think that team had Lamar Odom. It was not a very good basketball team, and Kobe Bryant got them to the playoffs and all that. I think that's the only season that maybe compares. But yeah, James Harden for sure, I believe, should have been the MVP that season.
Definitely. But yeah, that's one of the most interesting Harden years. I'd say 2018 in the playoffs against literally one of the greatest teams assembled, and they were up 3-2. And if potentially not for injuries, or 0 of 27 in a row, they could have went to the finals. And let's be honest, the Western Conference Finals was who was going to be the champion. That Cavs had Kyle Korver on the face of the promo. Kyle Korver, at 30-something, was on the promo against Kevin Durant. It was Kevin Durant, and next to him was Kyle Korver. That just shows you what would have happened if the Rockets were there. It wouldn't have been much different.
So I think we'll take one more question, and this will be the last one. Just because I've seen a couple Justin Fields questions in here, and I don't think we answered them, so we'll answer this one right here. Should Nagy start Justin Fields or let him sit to learn? Predictions for the Bears this season? Blake, floor is yours.
I kind of like with the starting with the veteran quarterback, but I feel in recent times it really hasn't proven much. If he's ready to start and he knows the playbook, which I'm sure he does, and I think he's much more talented than Dalton ever was. I think just let him start. And here's a couple of examples. We saw what the Texans did when they wanted to have Deshaun Watson not be the starter, and he didn't get first team reps. Now he came in against the Bengals, played all right, and then he had that amazing rookie season. How did they not know that he was going to be that good? I feel they had to have known, right? We saw with Tyrod Taylor twice with Baker Mayfield. He started a few games, then Baker Mayfield came in, played great. Then for the Chargers, Tyrod Taylor played against the Bengals. It was one of the most boring games of the whole year. It was not entertaining whatsoever. Justin Herbert comes in, plays amazing. I feel like you can start these rookie guys, and if they are talented, like, just throw them out there. I know there's the whole, like, you don't want to throw them to the wolves, hurt their confidence or whatever, but we've seen time and time again the veteran quarterback or the bridge quarterback who's supposed to be just comes in and is really not all that good themselves. So it's like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
And another example, do you remember Mike Glennon when they had Trubisky? And I think they took him, they benched him after he fumbled because there was a snap that hit his knee and it just rolled across and the Packers got the ball. And it was soon after, I think it was the next game after that. It was.
Yeah. And as bad as Trubisky was an evident upgrade over Mike Glennon. Yeah. So I'm 100% with you. I'm glad you're preaching this. The bridge quarterback, in my opinion, is one of the biggest moments of BS in the NFL. If you think real quarterback development is happening in the NFL by sitting these guys, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you because I don't think it's happening. The best example everybody points to is Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes had 50 touchdowns the first season he started. 1 year sitting doesn't cause people to have 50 touchdowns the first year they start. He had one of the greatest quarterback regular seasons of all time in his first year of starting. So I don't believe in the bridge quarterback. I mean, Lamar Jackson, we saw Lamar Jackson, people said he has to sit, blah, blah, blah. He carried Baltimore to the playoffs as a rookie. They weren't very good with Joe Flacco, and they had an excellent defense. And the moment they put Lamar Jackson in, everything changed. So I think with Justin Fields and Andy Dalton, I think Andy Dalton's a competent starter. But to me, you got to put in Justin Fields. He's more dynamic. He's more accurate down the field. I think should the Bears let him sit the year to learn? No, I think that's a bad idea, especially, and I don't think they will because obviously they're playing with fire. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace could be gone, and so they need Justin Fields to be on the field and showing something. Predictions for the Bears this season. Honestly, I think the Bears will be a near 500 team. I think 8-9, 9-8, 7-10 sounds about right. I think the issue for them is that one, I think there are holes in the roster. I think their offensive line, though they got Tevin Jenkins, I still think it's a little bit of a question mark. I personally am not a fan, though they have Cole Kmet. Allen Robinson, he remains a question mark on whether he's going to play with him and his franchise tag situation. And Darnell Mooney, I don't personally think that's enough. I wish they had a more defined number 2 option. I'm not the biggest fan of Nagy's play calling, and I do think Nagy doesn't do the best job of taking advantage of the run game, especially the quarterback run game, which they only ran the football well for the first time under Nagy when Nagy wasn't calling plays. He's back to calling plays. Justin Fields, a large aspect of his talent is his ability to run the football personally, and if they can't take advantage of it because they couldn't with Mitchell Trubisky, I think that's going to be a problem. And then I'm cheering for the Bears defense, actually. I don't cheer for the Bears at all. Everybody knows how much I hate the Bears, but I'm cheering for their defense. My man Sean Desai, let's go. Sean Desai is representing a nation, but I think there's holes in their defense. I think there's real question marks in terms of with their defensive line. I think they're overly relying on both Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack. I don't think Robert Quinn has lived up. I like their linebackers. Roquan Smith is very good, but I then have questions at the corner position. I know Jalen Johnson played good. He's a grabby, physical corner, but Kyle Fuller is not there anymore, and Kyle Fuller has been consistently one of the 15 best cornerbacks in the NFL the last few years. Eddie Jackson, we saw how precipitous his drop-off has been since Vic Fangio left. Another important reason when I talk about Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt, why scheme has such an impact on safety play. Just look at the safeties that play with Vic Fangio. Justin Simmons is now being talked about how Eddie Jackson was being talked about 2 years ago. So that goes and tells you how much of an impact that has. So I do think the Bears have a lot of question marks where I think that'll ultimately hold back their team. But in terms of Fields, he should start as soon as possible. Whenever you feel like Justin Fields can run your offense from the sense that he can call your offense in the huddle and get your offense lined up correctly, he should start as soon as that's the point.
Mm-hmm. And I'm with you, like, with the sitting quarterbacks and, like, the whole bridge thing. But I will say this. The bridge quarterback, like, idea is good when you're when your bridge is actually like a good quarterback and will win you games and makes you competitive. I think it's when the quarterback is like less than average or not actually like able to like be a solid enough game manager to where you can win games. Because if you're losing games, the fans are basically just going to demand for the quarterback you drafted. Like for Aaron Rodgers' sake, they had Brett Favre. They had a well-established quarterback. For the Packers now, they have Aaron Rodgers, who well-established quarterback. So Love's actually like he's learning while sitting. It's not like he's sitting for 3 weeks and then he goes in because, like, yeah, he's probably learning a lot those 3 weeks, but it's nothing like that's going to make him from a quarterback who's unplayable to a quarterback who's going to throw for 40 touchdowns or whatever.
Right.
So if you have like that Alex Smith's a good example, or
he's the best.
Or a Jared Goff, or I mean, I don't know, like you could say Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, like the mid-tier or above good quarterbacks. Like I think those guys are the bridge quarterbacks that you want to have because you're still competitive. Your team's not just getting waxed while your star quarterback who you just drafted, who's a high prospect, is just biting his nails to get in. It wouldn't be like that at all. You want him to come in,
I think the key thing is that you want him to come in when he's ready to play. And that's the argument I make. Like, theoretically, Jimmy G is that guy because the Niners can win with Jimmy G. They've proven they can win with Jimmy G, right? So theoretically, he's the kind of guy. But to me, it's not a competition because once you give up those assets to go get the quarterback, when he's ready, just because you have Jimmy G or Andy Dalton or Alex Smith or Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins, whichever guys you named, I don't think it matters. There's no benefit in those guys finishing out a season or playing for you because they're not the future. So if your quarterback is ready to play, whoever you traded up for, then get him on the field, in my opinion. If it takes him a year to play, then luckily you have Jimmy G to play for a year. You have Alex Smith to play for a year. If it takes him 6 weeks, then luckily you had Jimmy G for 6 weeks, and now your quarterback is ready to go. But I see no benefit in if the guy is ready, waiting because you have Jimmy G or you have Alex Smith or you have Jared Goff or any of the guys you named personally.
Well, I guess to counter that, like we've seen in the past, and I would bring up the 2016 Cowboys when they thought Dak was the guy, and now he played great, but Tony Romo was a spectacular top 10 quarterback, and I think a lot of Cowboys fans in the media were, thinking like, if that was Tony Romo in there, would they have won? Now, so I'll say this: Tony Romo was better than Alex Smith.
That's important, right?
Yeah,
because Tony Romo was a legitimate top quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. He was a legitimate franchise quarterback, so he kind of changed the conversation. And then Dak had arguably, outside of Justin Herbert, I think Dak's rookie season is the best rookie season I've ever seen. So, like, those are two outlier situations for me in this particular situation.
Definitely. I'll give my prediction. I don't think they're going to start Fields right away. I think they'll go with Dalton. I thought the defensive points – I really think this defense is very, very contingent on Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks' health. Because we've seen what happens when Hicks gets injured. And he's been injured the last few years, and he's 32. Their run defense goes from really, really good to very, very average. And
Khalil Mack's production goes from top defensive player in the NFL to really good defensive player.
Yeah, and you can't really it's not his fault, but when their defense really hinges on those two guys, it's concerning. And I think the Fuller loss is really not being talked about enough because, as you mentioned, with Fuller, he was regarded as a top 5 corner. He's been consistently just a really, really good cornerback one on any given team. Losing that's going to hurt, and Jalen Johnson was a good 2, but having him be the 1. I don't know. I'm not really sold on their other corners, and they didn't address defense at all in the draft very much. If you remember, they traded up for Tevin Jenkins, so they took 2 offensive guys. They didn't really have many mid-round picks. They didn't really get to upgrade their defense with depth. So, yeah, I am a little more concerned about the Bears' defense because they really are just 1 or 2 injuries away from struggling mightily. And you could say that about a lot of teams, though, right? You could say the same thing about the Packers, but I feel like the Packers defense is just they're guys that are the 4th to 8th best defenders are maybe a little bit you trust them more than the Bears because the Bears really have 4 just incredible guys that just hold it all down. And when one of those guys goes out, yeah, it is really concerning.
I agree. I agree.
So yeah, I'd say similar record, with the contingency that Justin Fields is not, like the next best quarterback, or doesn't turn out to have like the best rookie season,
Mm-hmm. All right, so it's been an hour and 40 minutes, guys. It's been a long show. Thank you for joining us for this long. We'll do another Q&A. I know there were a lot of good questions that we missed. We'll do another Q&A soon. We appreciate you, all of us, joining us on kind of an awkward time. Again, just keep an eye on our YouTube community and keep an eye on my Twitter. Our streaming is obviously inconsistent, but whenever we're free, we'll post the day of. So if you're free, you can join in. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, share. We'll probably stream sometime again soon. Hopefully hoops with Nolan if he's not too busy eating meatball sub and having some chocolate chip cookies. If he's not too busy doing that, hopefully we'll do some basketball with him. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back soon.